One of the hottest brands in 2023 was Gameday Men's Health. And so we're going to spend the next handful of minutes going behind the scenes and why we would choose to show Gameday to one of our candidates. So we feel like this is a segment not necessarily to help you understand Gameday Men's Health, but it's more to help you understand what we look for in a brand to concierge this approach and find you the best fit. Here we go. So in this case, Gameday Men's Health is a affordable men's health and wellness clinic focusing on men only. Their kind of four core processes are low testosterone, ED, vitamins, and weight loss therapy, specifically for men. As you know, there's no perfect brand out there for every single person. Now, this brand is great for people like me. That's right. We actually were awarded 2 units of Gameday Men's Health here in Northeast Wisconsin, but that doesn't mean it's for everybody. And so something I wanted to talk about here as well is the fact that usually I'm going to be a little bit more pessimistic when we see a brand growing super fast. So Gameday sold over 400 locations in its first launch into franchising in 2023. And so most of the time I might sit back and go, okay, but can they open them? Well, what I did was I looked at the history of another medical brand a few years ago that grew really, really fast. And then it just so happened last year they opened 140 locations. So basically I said, okay, they can get it done. But what else am I looking at? This one is hard to find something not to like. I think you can see on my screen here, their item 7 is pretty reasonable, 225 to 390 from their low end to high end. Remember, you're going to get the details of that spread of the item 7 once you get the FDD. But when I looked at that and I went through all of the details in the FDD behind the item 7, they seemed reasonable. The biggest spread there is usually in real estate and then some working capital to get lined up. So far this was looking pretty good. Okay, so as you know, in that item 7, there's going to be a spread, a low range to high range. When we look at Gameday's item 7, 225 low to 391 high. And so what we did when we looked into the FDD and kind of looked where the basics would normally be for that low to high spread, we see it's in rent. That's normal, right? It's going to cost different for you in Dallas or New York or Chicago than it is for me in Appleton, Wisconsin to find a lease and stand that business up. So we can see that being pretty reasonable. There's some leasehold improvements built in there. You're going to need medical exam equipment. Are you going to lease it or going to buy it, right? Those are normal expenses into the business. And so we're okay so far looking at this one and feeling that the expenses are realistic for what it costs to stand up. 3 months of working capital in this one, 55 to 65. And remember, this is a medical clinic. So depending on the laws in your state, you probably will need to have a medical director. And so one of the things that we think about when we're looking at this brand or who we're going to show it to is going to be someone that's comfortable hiring a doctor and overseeing and managing nurse practitioners, medical assistants, physician's assistants as well. So kind of keep that in mind when we start looking at the labor model on this one. We had to make sure that anyone that we show it to is going to be comfortable overseeing not a lot of employees, but employees that definitely have a high degree, a great deal of education, and sometimes that can be intimidating. Remember that item 19 in a franchise usually is going to be reflective of the previous calendar year and all franchisees who were in business that entire previous calendar year. Now, in this case, when Gameday launched, a majority of their locations were corporate locations. So they really, in my perspective looking at this, I feel like their item 19 was really transparent. And I'm sure it had to do because of that, because obviously everybody was going to be a little bit hesitant saying, okay, can those corporate numbers be duplicated, or can whatever the corporate system is doing be duplicated throughout the country? And so they really got into a pretty detailed, in my opinion, item 19. It's 14 pages long. It goes into their corporate locations, when those locations got into business, the gross revenue, if they had an MSO, that medical services organization, and then they also then got into some of the payroll expenses and the expenses of running the clinic right in the item 19. And please know, we don't always see that. So it was great to see they weren't just splashing fabulous gross revenue numbers, which a lot of brands will do, and no offense to those brands, but it was really great to see Gameday get into the weeds with some of their P&Ls and their balance sheets. And they really gave us some tangible numbers regarding the income in the business, so we could lay out our own pro forma for us. And then our candidates that we were working with were able to ask really detailed questions around that, because they were so transparent. Remember, when we're looking at an item 19, the brand can really only address income for the business that is stated or reflected in the item 19. They can't just kind of paint a perfect picture and say, what if, and in a perfect world. It has to be tangible numbers. And so for this, I was impressed with Gameday and their transparency of their item 19. And so I think that that's one of the things that you're going to look at. Don't just look at the gross revenue of a business. See how much detail you can grab. I really hope that helps. Okay, with any of the brands that we look at, we tend to also review the management team, especially if the brand is newer to the industry of franchising. Okay, so a lot of people ask, Lisa, why did you guys choose Gameday after 10 years of looking at thousands of franchises? Why was this the one that you chose? And in our moment in time, what we were looking for in a business was a business that we could grow, not necessarily semi-passively, because my husband actually rolled up his independent business in order to actually devote full-time opportunity to this. So although they allow semi-absent and you can manage a manager, what really kind of attracted us to the brand was the management team and the way the founder, in this case, I have him on the screen here, Evan Miller, put together his business. And listening to him and asking him questions, I definitely got the feeling that this was just someone I could trust working with and doing business with, especially because it was so new. Yes, he had some great corporate locations, really high numbers, and that's of course what got everybody's attention. But I think what really drove it home for us was the fact that Evan was just a stand-up guy. This isn't his first rodeo. This isn't his first toe step into the business. He also has put together a management team that, in my opinion, is ready for the growth. And I'll say, as we're getting into the business now, we are seeing him continually add staff, add support, add what these hundreds of franchise owners need in order to grow in a system. And again, that's something that we look at when I'm working with you, especially if it's a new brand. We have to really dig into, how are you going to be supported short and long term? Yes, this brand is associated with franchise sales organization, Fastlane. They grow businesses. That's their kind of DNA. And so, yes, they can grow businesses, and yes, they can sell franchises. But what we want to look for in the brand is, does it have longevity? Do they have all of the arrows in the quiver to ride out the storm and ride out the fact that this brand is going to be growing at just a rapid pace? And so doing that sort of research really helped. And it is one of the reasons that we can show this brand to a lot of people. Now, here's something else to keep in mind when we're looking at businesses, and especially when we're looking at fast growing businesses, and that's the maps. How fast are these brands growing? You'll see some of the maps. And again, these were from last fall. These are all sold now. But this brand basically laid out where the territory was going to be viable in the market. Now, remember, in the FDD, you can go to the item 12. You can understand the viability in the market. With this brand, as we were working with our candidates, we really did have to point out the number of clinics that Gameday felt was going to be viable in a territory and make sure a candidate was okay with that. And in most cases, capable of being awarded a couple of clinics. Okay, so the onesie, even twosie brands that are going to be surrounded by other clinics may not be as strong. And there's going to be some ability to scale your business more efficiently in this case when you have multiple units. And so we definitely kind of dug in there with our candidates. So the question comes at the end of this series, who are we showing this to? So the brand is saying anyone semi-absent, entrepreneurs that have a passion for health and wellness. They definitely kind of want to be in that world, maybe not necessarily fitness. And then they don't necessarily need medical experience, so we don't need to be finding doctors in order to own these clinics, with a good understanding of what their liquid capital is and what their net worth is. So as I look at it even more, and as we dug into the brand, the other thing that I really look for is someone that can handle working with and employing a very professional employee. The clinicians that are patient-facing are nurse practitioners or physician's assistants, okay? Some of the people that I'm working with are more comfortable working with an employee that has gone to school, has some education, in this case, licensed. In this case, also, in most of the states, some of the states, they are hiring a medical director. They're employing a doctor or working with a doctor to actually own the clinic. So you have to kind of have an understanding of how corporate practice of medicine works. There's going to be attorneys involved. And so one of the things I considered, I should say, when I was showing this brand to people is, did they have the business acumen and the professional confidence to be employing doctors, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants? And so it's something to really keep in mind as you're looking at, gee, I wonder if she's going to show me something, or I want to see something in that medical space. But there's also has to be a level of confidence working with those professionals. And also, yes, it says semi-absentee, but I do think that it's going to take an owner that's at least going to want to be more involved in the business. And remember, for a semi-absentee owner, they're going to need to pay a manager to run that business. And so that's going to increase, in my opinion, it's going to increase the amount of liquid capital, or the amount of working capital is probably a better way to say that person is going to be. If they're not going to be the face of the business, they're paying someone to be the salesperson and be the face of their business. The other thing I looked at here was definitely someone that was not afraid of being some of the first to market. This brand went fast. If you were someone that wanted to really slowly examine every little nuance and have private conversations with founders and tons of existing business owner in the business, this wasn't going to be the brand for you. The pace that you wanted to go wasn't the pace that this brand was growing at. And I didn't want people that I was working with that didn't want to, or I didn't want anyone to feel pressured. And I think in this brand, just because of the pace it was growing, it was really important just to get that up front. But semi-absent, decent liquidity, background, or at least not a background in medicine, but an interest in that space. Evan was not taking on new franchisees that were just seeing that fabulous item 19 and really wanted to do the money grab. If you didn't have a passion for what this brand stood for, it wasn't going to be the brand for you. So I hope that this helps you understand all the things that we're thinking about behind the scenes. It's not just the brochure. Now remember, we're your research assistants. I'm not going through FDDs with you. That is up to the brand to go through with you, and I will introduce you to franchise attorneys to make sure that you understand that FDD. But we are your research assistants, and we are your trusted advisors. And I would feel awful not knowing what I was advising on. So again, I would love to concierge an approach for you. What's the best brand for you, or what should you have your eyes on? My email is lisa@integrityfranchisegroup.com. My phone number is 920-427-6674. And I seriously look forward to connecting with you when you're ready. I hope this has helped to see kind of everything that goes into our research before we start presenting brands to you.